The autumn morning in Paris was unusually crisp, the kind that often carries a sense of anticipation. Outside Matignon, the residence of the French Prime Minister, cameras and microphones lined the path to the podium. A hush fell over the assembled press corps as Sébastien Lecornu appeared, walking steadily toward the podium, his expression calm but resolute. Behind him, the weight of history lingered. This would be his final address as Prime Minister of France.
Merci à toutes et à tous. Je vous remercie.
Being Prime Minister is a difficult task, probably even more difficult at the moment, but you can't be Prime Minister when the conditions aren't met. For 3 weeks, however, I have been trying to build the conditions for which we could have a budget adopted for France, for the state, but also for social security, and respond to some important emergencies that cannot wait until 2027, the presidential election. I don't want to list them all, but we know everyday security, issues related to purchasing power and work, New Caledonia, the armed forces, in a difficult international context, and so many other subjects.
Les armées dans un contexte international difficile et tant d'autres sujets.
The outgoing leader paused briefly, nodded to the press, and began speaking. His words set the tone for what would become one of the most surprising political developments in recent French history. Being Prime Minister is a difficult task, undoubtedly even a little more challenging at the moment, said Sébastien Lecornu, his voice measured but carrying the gravity of the moment. But one cannot be Prime Minister when the conditions are not met. This was not a man bowing out quietly. Instead, Lecornu laid bare the challenges that had plagued his brief time in office. For 3 weeks, he had tried to create the foundation for a functioning government, hoping to shepherd a national budget through the Assembly, a budget that would not only fund the machinery of the state, but also tackle pressing issues that, as he stressed, cannot wait until 2027, the presidential election. In his list were the very crises that have defined French politics in recent years: the need for stronger daily security, persistent struggles over purchasing power and employment, tensions in New Caledonia, and the demands of France's armed forces amid a turbulent international climate. Lecornu spoke with the cadence of someone who had fought these battles intensely, but had reached the limits of what could be achieved under the current political climate. The cameras zoomed in as Lecornu reflected on his approach. For the past 3 weeks, I have spoken rarely, he explained, his tone suggesting both weariness and a hint of defiance. I have tried to create a pathway with social partners, employer forces, and forces representing unionised employees, particularly on issues that have been blocked for many weeks, or in some cases much longer. I'm thinking about work, retirees, hardship, women with long careers, subjects that have been stuck for over 20 years and on which we were making progress with concrete solutions. For Lecornu, these were not abstract policy debates. They were long-stalled issues on which he believed progress had been made, only to be thwarted by a system locked in political gridlock. He went on to describe the often unseen side of political negotiation. These official consultations, sometimes more discreet, have allowed us to make progress on a certain number of topics, he recounted. Then, with a wry note that revealed his frustration with the process, he added, "I said it Friday morning, in the secrecy of the office, when tongues loosen and red lines become orange and sometimes green, with, of course, some shifts regarding unemployment insurance, fiscal justice issues, or pension reform. Nevertheless, we always had this feeling that the line moved back every time we moved forward. For 3 weeks, I have spoken rarely, and I have tried to build a path with the social partners, employers' forces, forces representing employee unions, particularly on issues that have been blocked for many weeks now, or even longer for some subjects. I am thinking of work, retirees, hardship, women with long careers, issues that have sometimes been blocked for more than 20 years, and on which we were moving forward with concrete solutions.
D'avancer sur des solutions concrètes, sur l'assurance chômage.
These official consultations, sometimes more discreet, have allowed us to move forward on a certain number of issues. As I said on Friday morning, in the privacy of the office, tongues are loosening and the red lines are becoming orange and sometimes green, with sometimes obviously a few lines moving on unemployment insurance, on the question of tax justice, or even on the question of pensions. However, there is always this feeling that the line is moving back each time we move forward.
des retraites, avec néanmoins toujours ce sentiment que la ligne se recule à chaque fois que nous avancions, mais de cela aussi...
That single phrase, the line moved back every time we moved forward, captured the essence of Lecornu's frustration. His efforts at compromise, he suggested, were met not with reciprocity, but with shifting demands that made progress elusive. In his address, Lecornu offered a candid assessment of the state of French politics. Political parties continue to adopt a stance as if they all held an absolute majority in the National Assembly, he said, his words carrying the weight of years of political stalemates. Fundamentally, I found myself in a situation where I was ready for compromise, but each political party wants the other political party to adopt its full programme. This is true for the formation sometimes of the common platform. It is also true for oppositions. There was, in that moment, a clear rebuke to France's fragmented political landscape. Lecornu's resignation, though personal, reflected a broader institutional failure, the inability of political parties to collaborate even in times of crisis. We have stated it. No broad coalition. The opposition political formations chose not to join the government with the common platform, but allowed debates and organised compromises afterwards, keeping in mind that compromises are not betrayals. But for that, of course, we need to change the mindset and not seek to apply the entirety of one's project and programme. The speech was not entirely defined by frustration. Toward the end, Lecornu's tone shifted, offering what he called a message of hope. The last message I want to convey to the French people is that fundamentally, and it is genuinely a message of hope and optimism, which I do not always exhibit in character, but it would only take a little for it to work, he said, pausing briefly as if to let the words sink in. I said here, we will make it, and I want to reiterate it in the secrecy of the exchanges I have had. It would only take a little for us to succeed, by being more selfless for many, by showing humility, perhaps also allowing for some egos to step aside. And I have tried my best, at least I hope I have, always keeping in mind the sense of general interest and meaningful action. What matters is what we will achieve by acknowledging that certain things can be done before 2027 and others later during the presidential election debate. In that sentiment, Lecornu revealed both his personal struggle and his vision for France. It was a plea for political actors to put aside egos and work for the collective good, a rare call for unity in a deeply divided political environment. The Prime Minister's remarks culminated in an appeal for pragmatism. There are many red lines for many people, at least for some, not for all, not for all. There are rarely green lines, he observed, acknowledging the difficulties of forging consensus. Yet the very principle of building a compromise between political formations is to be able to combine green lines and take into account several red lines. But we cannot dwell in extremes, and some opposition political formations have understood this, and I want to thank them. From now on, we need to move forward, at least for those who wish to find a pathway for the country to move forward. The political parties continue to adopt a posture as if they all have an absolute majority in the National Assembly. And basically, I found myself in a situation in which I was ready to compromise. But each political party wants the other political party to adopt its entire programme. This is sometimes true of the common core formations. It is also true of the oppositions. Now, as we have said, no broad coalition. It is a choice that was made by the different political formations of the opposition, not to come with the common core to the government, but to allow debates and then organise compromises, knowing that compromises are not compromise. But for that, obviously, we must change our mindset and not want to apply the entirety of its project and its programme. The last message that I want to say to the French people is that deep down, and it is a message truly of hope and optimism, in character I am not always, but it would take little for it to work. I said right here, we're going to get there, and I want to say it again in the privacy of the discussions I've had. It would take little for us to get there, by being more selfless for many, by also knowing how to show humility, perhaps also a little, sometimes, erasure of certain egos, and I have tried, in any case, I hope to do so, then always have a sense of the general interest and the substance. What matters is what we are going to do by having the humility to consider that certain things can be done before 2027 and other things will be done later during the presidential election debate.
D'autres choses seront faites ensuite pendant le débat de l'élection présidentielle.
The words hung in the air as Lecornu stepped away from the podium, the cameras following his slow return to Matignon. Reporters shouted questions, but he did not respond. Instead, he offered a polite nod and disappeared behind the doors of the Prime Minister's residence, no longer its occupant. For the French public, Lecornu's resignation marked a rare moment in the nation's political history, a Prime Minister stepping down before presiding over a single cabinet meeting. It exposed the intense political pressures of governing in an era of fractured alliances and shifting loyalties. It also underscored the challenges facing President Emmanuel Macron, who now must navigate a fresh political crisis and appoint a successor capable of uniting a fragmented assembly. In Paris, reactions were swift. Political commentators across television networks framed the resignation as both a personal setback for Lecornu and a reflection of deeper systemic problems. Some opposition leaders seized the moment to argue that Macron's government had failed to maintain stability. Supporters of Lecornu, however, described his resignation as an act of integrity, the decision of a man unwilling to preside over a government without the necessary foundations for effective governance. As the day unfolded, the streets outside Matignon became a gathering place for journalists and curious citizens alike. The air buzzed with speculation about who would step into the void and whether they could succeed where Lecornu had failed. For now, the image of a solemn Prime Minister delivering his final remarks before stepping down remains etched in the collective memory of the French people. A reminder that political leadership, however determined, cannot thrive without unity and compromise. In the end, Sébastien Lecornu's words may resonate far beyond his brief tenure. His call for humility, collaboration, and a focus on the common good reflects an enduring challenge for France's political class. Whether those words will inspire meaningful change remains to be seen. What is certain is that his resignation, so early and so dramatic, has opened a new chapter in France's political story, one marked by uncertainty, but also perhaps by the faint possibility of renewal. There are many red lines in any case of some, not of all. There are rarely green lines. Now, the very principle of building a compromise between political parties is to be able to combine green lines and take into account a certain number of red lines. But we cannot be in both extremes, and certain political parties in the opposition have understood this, and I would like to thank them. From now on, we must be able to move forward in any case. Those who want to find a path for the country must be able to move forward.
Il faut que l'on puisse avancer, en tout cas que celles et ceux qui veulent trouver un chemin pour le pays puissent avancer.